Have you ever heard the phrase that we are most like the top five people we spend time with? Well, today we're going to talk about how aligning yourself with winners turns you into a winner.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to sell online? Or maybe you've been thinking about it, but you're reserved to do it because you need a website, you need complicated systems, and you need to spend money? Well, I've created a completely free course that teaches you how to use Facebook in a purely organic way. This means no ads and no money are needed. You can use Facebook completely free. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com. Opt into my Profit from Social Media course. I'm going to teach you the free methods to using Facebook to make money today. And not only that, if you've ever seen the movie, it won several Academy Awards. It was a big hit, the movie Foxcatcher. We're bringing on the real character from that movie, Mark Schultz, who is played by Channing Tatum. Mark Schultz wants to introduce us and welcome us into the mindset of a champion. He's a two-time Olympic gold wrestler. He's been entered into the Hall of Fame, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. It's really fantastic. And not only that, he's written a New York Times best-selling book. The man is truly accomplished, and he's not just here to set the record straight about Foxcatcher, but also help us with some mindsets so that we can be champions. All right, welcome to the show, Thriving Launchers. Today, we have Mark Schultz. If you watch that movie Foxcatcher and you know anything about it, or you know some things about me, you know that I love wrestling. So I brought on one of the most inspirational wrestling guys that I can think of in the gamut of amazing wrestlers. And it's really interesting because Mark was featured in that movie, Foxcatcher. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Mark. Are you ready to launch?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So, Mark, you were featured in that movie, Foxcatcher. What was that like? What was the experience of hanging out with some of the stars from the movie to have that movie come out? Let's just start with, what is it like to be featured in a movie?
Well, for me, it was very different. You know, I did a panel in Hollywood. It was called My Life Turned into Film, A Surreal Experience. And the other panel guests were Aaron Ralston from 127 Hours and Tony Mendez from Argo. And I think his name was Ben something. He was the moderator. He asked all of us, did you like the movie? And those two guys said yes, almost immediately before they could get the question out. Me, I took about 10 seconds and I looking up in the air wondering what I should say, because it was not a slam dunk for me as to whether I liked it or not because of the way I was portrayed. And Bennett Miller, the director, portrayed me in a way that I did not like, but he did get the movie made and he got the funding to get the movie made. And the actors did a great job, and I don't want to take anything away from the actors. You know, it got 5 Academy Awards, including Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. Channing Tatum did not get a Best Supporting or Best Actor award or nomination. But I don't like the way I was portrayed because it portrays me as sort of this inarticulate, emotionally fragile, kind of a dumb jock. And I was the Student Athlete of the Year at Oklahoma University. And you can't be dumb to win the Olympics. You can't be emotionally fragile. It's an oxymoron. You can't do it, not in wrestling. And so for them to portray me that way, for the director to portray me that way, it was a little bit insulting. And I kind of resented him for a long time. And I still am a little resentful of the way he did that because, I kept telling him in the beginning, if you just follow my book is called Foxcatcher also. It's a New York Times bestseller. If you just follow the book, you're going to have a great movie. It's going to be like Rocky or something like that. And, it ended up being this horror movie in a way. And my book is not about the murder. My book is about my life with my brother. And the murder occupies a very small part of my life story. So I was pretty unhappy with the way I was portrayed, but I was happy that I got paid. I was happy that
the story was being told.
yeah, and my brother was being immortalized.
I'm wondering what you wish would have been included. What part of the story that you feel should have been included?
Well, my college years, for one thing. You know, I was just named the greatest college wrestler of the 1980s in a book that just came out called The Golden Age of Wrestling, 1980s. And none of that was included. My fight at the end of the movie in UFC 9 was not included. That was a very significant event for me because DuPont had basically ruined or destroyed my motivation, ruined my wrestling career. I wasn't getting paid very much, and I was just killing myself. And I just thought, oh, why am I doing this? And I just walked away from the sport. Mm-hmm. And I made sure that my last experience in wrestling was a bitter one because I didn't want to come back. And I intentionally lost in the '88 Olympics. But I was depressed because I couldn't win for DuPont's team. It was immoral. And I made a comeback. In 1991, I had a match with the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter in the world. And he got me in a couple submission holds, and I became a student of his students, Pedro Sauer. I got my black belt, and then I fought in the UFC, in UFC 9. This was before they had all the rules.
That's right. This was when there wasn't weight classes. There was a lot less rules about when and where you could hit. It was just a completely different world. This was when you were in the UFC, fighters like Royce Gracie and the originators were there, and the UFC was a very different ball field. It was a lot like Bloodsport with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like, it was a completely different place, and the amount of power and strength that you must have had to find within yourself to go and try to recreate yourself. Pretty amazing, Mark.
Well, thank you. It was a very risky proposition walking into that octagon because the only rules were no eye gouging, no biting. There was no gloves, no weight classes. You could kick in the groin, you could headbutt, elbow on the ground, you could grab the fence, you could rake his face against the fence, and tear his ears off. I mean, he fish hook his mouth. I mean, the stuff that you could do was incredible. He'd break his fingers. And we were just, it was just, I don't know. It's weird because when you're it's like a life and death. Not a lot of people have died. I think one person only has died in the UFC. I had a friend of mine that had his eye socket smashed and crushed, and he started wearing glasses because he almost went blind in that eye. And he lost to the guy that I fought in the UFC, and he got caught in a fix and got elbowed in the head like 20 times before the ref stopped it. It was the most significant event of my life because it was the last athletic event, last competition I ever competed in, and it ended my career in the way I wanted, going out a winner in the most ultimate man against man combat sport. And that's why I got into wrestling in the first place. It wasn't to win competitions or tournaments, it was to defend myself. I thought wrestling was the ultimate martial art, and then I found jiu-jitsu, and I switched over immediately.
So this is my big question for you here, Mark, is you have these upsets in life that could really knock a person down. Losing your brother, being part of this amazing team, and then not really feeling like you want to be a part of it or really wrestle all out and be fully who you are. As wrestlers, I know for myself personally, being out on that mat is one of the most beautiful, spectacular moments I can look back on my life, and I know that it was so special to me. Now, to have an upset and kind of a destruction of your life the way that you had it, and then you write this fantastic book, it becomes a New York Times bestseller, you go on and wrestle and fight inside the UFC and win some matches there, you train, you recreate yourself. Then this movie comes out and it portrays you in a way that you don't really like, and that's kind of another upset. What are some of the ways that you've found that maybe all of us here at Thriving Launch, we can apply some of your mindsets that will help us recreate ourselves? Because I know that I have upsets in life. Kamala has upsets. Our audience, they have upsets. What are some of the ways that you've just taken these upsets and these difficult moments and recreated yourself and found that strength again?
Well, one thing I learned was, number one, you stand up for yourself. When Bennett Miller came out in an article. The writer wrote that it was Bennett Miller's intention to disrespect and demean me and my character. I went public and I attacked him in public media on Twitter, Facebook, and I basically stood up for myself. And I apologized for the harshness of my language, but I did not apologize for standing up for myself. And because of that, and I did not intend for this to happen, but because of that, my book took off in sales. And it made people interested in the story, wanting to get the true story. And there's a lot of lessons in the book. I didn't, the book is called Foxcatcher. I didn't name it. The publishers named it because they wanted to take advantage of the publicity around the movie. I don't like the name, but it's my autobiography. And there's a lot of lessons in there that, people can glean about what to do when they are facing adversity or, facing some obstacle they have to overcome, or some person in their life who is causing problems for them. And I have had a very tumultuous, intense, difficult life in that way. And I've suffered a lot of physical pain pushing myself. You talk about wrestling being this beautiful, spectacular event. To me, it wasn't that at all. To me, it was, look, if I'm having any fun at all, I'm not pushing myself hard enough. So that was my philosophy. And I lived that philosophy up until I wrestled and fought my last fight. I just figured if I was having any fun, I could still push myself harder and harder. I doubled down a lot of times. People question whether I, what I'm doing or saying. And, I take my losses hard. One thing I think people can learn from wrestling and from me and maybe you is we learn the most from our losses. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to gain. Everybody wants to be rich. But when we make mistakes and we lose and, we get ripped off, we don't forget those. And you can learn a lot more if you are determined to overcome and never make the same mistake twice. And to me, losing was the worst possible thing. It was like a crime. It was like a sin I could not commit. And that's where we learn our most valuable lessons, is from our losses, if we're willing to study them, review them. I don't forget my losses. I forget my wins, but not my losses.
Funny how that works. It's really powerful what you're saying, and that's a complete tweetable for me. We win the most from our losses, or we learn the most. We get the most from our losses. I remember when I started wrestling back in 9th grade was the first time that I had actually wrestled. And when I started, I was going up against guys that had been wrestling since grade school, middle school, and I was brand new to it, and I got my butt kicked. And after a few of those butt kickings, I had to start thinking, if I want to win, if I want to be really great in the sport, and I like the sport, I can tell that I'll be great at it. But if I want to be great, my whole perspective around losing will have to change. It'll have to be different. Otherwise, I'm just going to be a loser. So I started to think, I'm always winning as long as I'm learning. Even every time I go out there and try, even if I lose, if I can take something and learn from it, then I'm winning. So in that respect, I'm always winning. And I think you really hit the nail on the button there when we're talking about life. So what kind of lessons did you get out of being portrayed in this movie Foxcatcher in a way that you didn't like? What kind of lessons have you taken from it and utilized in your life, or ways that you've empowered yourself?
Well, one of the things I really dislike about the movie is that it has me looking up to DuPont as sort of this mentor, father figure, leader, coach, whatever you want to call him. And, the truth of the matter is, when I was out there, first of all, Dave and I, in the movie, it shows Dave and I competing on the farm, Foxcatcher Farms, at the same time. That's pure fiction. Dave and I were not on the farm at the same time. We were never on the farm at the same time. And another thing is, I did not go to Philadelphia to join Team Foxcatcher. I went there to take a job at Villanova University. That's one thing that I really resented about the movie, was they had me looking up to DuPont as this winner that I wanted to associate with. And nothing could be further from the truth. It was the complete opposite, actually. He was a loser that I didn't want to associate with. And I tried everything I could to stay away from him and keep distance from him because I didn't want his negative loser association, vibes rubbing off on me. And that's one thing you learn in life is if you want to be great in anything, you have to associate with winners. And DuPont knew this concept. He knew if he hung around winners, it would rub off on him. And it did. But the problem was, hanging around him rubbed off on me the wrong way. And it negatively affected me. Mm-hmm. And it's not funny. And anyway, if you want to be great in something, associate with winners, watch them and copy them. And pretty soon you'll be great in that thing too.
It's a really powerful message there. And to be able to go through so much and then to have the whole world be able to get a very limited perspective of it, and for you to be able to continue to hold on to your truth. I mean, it just really brings an inspiration for how to live as a winner. It doesn't mean that, we can't all be Olympic gold medalists and Olympic winners like you are, but I'd love to know if there's anything else that you want to make sure that the world knows about your story or that you want to leave the audience with.
Well, the true story of Foxcatcher, Team Foxcatcher, is actually in a documentary called The Prince of Pennsylvania. It was on Netflix. There's another one on Team Foxcatcher that Nancy Schultz made. It was Dave's widow. And those are accurate. Matter of fact, I'm not even in Nancy's documentary because Dave and I were never on the farm at the same time. But the thing that I would want people to know about me is if you want to be successful, find the best people in that field. Do whatever it takes to associate with them. For me, I tried to make people laugh. My dad was a professional comedian, so I could make people laugh. I used to memorize Steve Martin, Bill Cosby before he went, and then I would make them laugh, and they would like me to hang around with them. And because of that, I was allowed to hang out with college guys. Like, for example, when I was in high school, which was a huge advantage. And I hung around with Andre Metzger, who was the youngest world medalist ever at Oklahoma. It was a huge advantage associating with him. And I just did whatever I had to do to get into the groups that I wanted to get into, the guys that were the most successful. And if I, hung around them long enough, I did what they did. And soon I became as good as them. That's how you make it in life.
That's really powerful to hear that from you, someone who has had so much success in their own life. Not only have you been an Olympic athlete, you've also been a New York Times bestseller. You're someone that I look up to and really admire for what you've done. So I really appreciate the keys that you've given us today, and also just setting the record straight about your own history and some of the things that you didn't like about the movie, and also just sharing your success and what you've been up to and letting us know how we can also tap into those mindsets. One of the things that we've done here at Thriving Launch, which is really special to me, is we bring on the most successful possible people that we can find in all sorts of areas of life, so that the listeners and the community at Thriving Launch, so that all of you can tap into this excellence and this wisdom and share some time with all of us, so that it changes and somehow reprograms you for success. Not only do I interview this so that the audience gets it, I do it so that I also get to sit down with Olympic athletes or New York Times bestselling authors, or just the most successful people we can find, so I can spend time with that person and then give that gift back to the world. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, Mark.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.